A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
My next guest is Paul Ninnes. My husband Peter and I have huge respect for this young man. He is the Managing Director of Real Talk Australia. He has a Bachelor of Physiotherapy, but he's not in here to rub our shoulders or do anything like that, although I might get him to fix my foot. And then, but afterwards he did postgraduate qualifications, and those were in sexual health and theology. Paul and his wife Emma have 6 beautiful children, so it naturally follows that he has a passion for the well-being of children and young people. He is sought after as a speaker, and that's particularly for his wisdom on maintaining safety and integrity in the online space. But more recently, Paul has pioneered a new resource, and it's called Stout-Hearted. Paul, welcome to the program.
It's awesome to be here, Wendy.
So good to have you. It's nice to have you in the studio with me. Mostly I'm talking to people online, so I'm sort of trying to look at the camera. But I want to start with Stout-Hearted, if that's okay by you.
Sure.
So my understanding is that this is a program designed for men by men, and it's in order to invite God's grace into probably what I'm going to say is their deepest thoughts and their struggles. So I'd like to hear more about the actual program, and we're going to get to that. We'll get to that probably after the next little short break that we could have with a song. But before we go there, I want to just ask you for some commentary on what I'm calling the current cultural moment, and what motivated you to write this program. When I talk about the current cultural moment, that's quite a mouthful, I'm talking about, everybody's talking about lost boys. Everyone's talking about Jordan Peterson, what he's saying. By the way, my understanding is that Jordan's quite unwell at the moment, so we need to be praying for him. Charlie Kirk, the whole phenomenon that was Charlie Kirk, and the way that he really related to young men. Even the probably a little bit older men, the men's shed movement, that seems to have really touched a nerve as well. So what's going on for men and boys that you believed so strongly that this was a resource that was needed?
Great introduction. And internationally, young men are growing in the numbers, going back to church across Europe and places like that. So, look, my own story is probably the thing that really hammered this home for me. And it was your classic story of a young person going to church but never having discipleship in some of the deepest, darkest places of my life. And also that being the topic, my sexual decision-making, that was really leading me away from God, but in the end helped lead me back to God. And so when I saw that, and I saw other young people that I then ministered to, being led back to God through this topic of relationships and sex and their sexual struggles, it seemed to me the obvious choice and also the obvious area that was under-resourced within the church. And so for about 15 years, I've been developing programming around the topic, using others' programs, getting stuff from the US and trying those out. And that's sort of led to Stout-Hearted now being released in Australia.
And so, our churches, many good churches preach through the Bible, and so when they do this expositional sort of teaching, they do touch on areas of this. But I guess when they're in a church service, you've got young people there, you've got young children there, you've got men and women, you've got people in different stages of life. You perhaps can't go into some of these areas that you're going to go into with this?
Yeah, look, totally. Look, in some ways I haven't quite got my head around why churches aren't addressing this topic more. But it is a problem that we need to address there as well. But I think there's some obvious practical things that in a congregation that has multiple ages and men and women together, it can put some limitations on how you get real on topics of relationships and sex. And then at the same time, there's a lot of shame involved in this. And then if you look at the stats, there's just a lot of people, including Christian leaders, who are struggling. And so that often may, on a hidden level or an obvious level, be something that persuades them to not address this because they've spent their life avoiding their own areas of struggle in this area.
And so it does feel as if this is a real cultural moment in that, you do have these men, some with really good messaging.
Yes.
I would say that, by far and away, the messaging from Charlie Kirk was really good messaging. But then some have gone really extreme, and we're seeing people, men particularly, even in Nazi uniforms, marching on the streets, and angry. Like,
Yes.
there are a lot of angry men. Do you have any comment about the cultural moment we're in with that?
Yeah, I think it shows to a yearning that's misplaced, right? Like often pendulums swing. When someone's been put in a cage for a long time, they bust out. And I was thinking on the way here, actually, reflecting on the topic, and I was reminded of a C.S. Lewis quote, and I haven't got it in front of me, but he sort of says, we castrate the gelding and bid it be fruitful. We make men without chests and expect of them virtue and enterprise. And so I think the cultural moment is encapsulating a little bit of that. There's a yearning within masculinity for what might have been considered more traditional or opportunities to step up and step out and grow in their strength and character and their masculine identity. And then that can be misplaced sometimes, but there's also a great opportunity within the church. And obviously we're seeing in social media many, social commentators are inadvertently or sometimes deliberately leading men back to churches because they're looking for structure, they're looking for leadership in their own life, and they're looking for a higher standard for themselves. And that sometimes that challenges what compels men to go into places that they haven't gone before, including, seeking discipleship, seeking churches, seeking sometimes, an ascetic, a real stoicism or imposing things on themselves, such as fasting and physical activities that can actually demand more of them that taps into their identity that they're actually searching for.
So for me, you're the ideal person to speak to this area. You are a very approachable person. You do have a very strong sense of what is right and what is true. You have that sort of plumb line of the biblical understanding of what manhood is. But at the same time, there's real empathy there. And there is also a very manly demonstration of love for other men.
Yes.
I think that's sometimes missing as well. I know,
Yes.
in my dad's era, he would never have hugged another man, and yet he was the best dad ever.
Yeah.
But even last night, the Queensland. I'll just mention once more time. Queensland won the football. Just drop that in.
You're about to say what was in my head as you were speaking, so I'm sure you're about to tell the story I was about to go to.
The hugging and I love you, man.
Yeah.
But
you're talking about the rugby league grand final.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. Yes, I am talking about
specifically. Can I just point you to? And I'm guessing some of our listeners around the country didn't watch this, but there was a moment where one of the Brisbane Broncos was knocked out. And Reece Walsh, the biggest star in rugby league at the moment, went up to him and just held him.
Yes.
He just held him, and it became more than just, I'm holding you up so you don't fall over. He put his head and he cradled his head. I'm tearing up as I speak about it. He cradled his head like I cradle my crying baby on his shoulder. And he nurtured this man. And my kids talked about this on the way home from we went to a party to watch the game. And it was a beautiful moment.
It was.
And I think we're there's great things of the traditional masculinity, but there is also some things that weren't great, including the ability to share feelings, the ability to be there for you, the ability to reach out when you're suffering. And so we can take the best things of our traditional masculinity that we've experienced, and then we can also incorporate some of the wisdom that we've harnessed from modern psychology and the recognition that speaking actually helps you.
It was a really beautiful moment in a number of different ways too, because in one way I think it also showed that manly virtue of I'm going to stick in there, I'm going to be there with my mates, because the guy who was knocked out, he did not want to go off the field. He was like, and he was staggering, but he was like, I'll be okay, mate, I'll be okay, because he wants to be there for his mates. He's sort of like in a bit of a sort of a war last night, and I'm going to be there. I'm going to stick with you. But Reece Walsh was saying, no, we care about you more than the game.
Oh, and let's stay with that analogy because it's such a beautiful image. And I think when it comes to men's struggles, it's so true, right? Is someone's trying to brave it out and someone's suffering. So I haven't told you this, Wendy, but I'm about to start the Stout Hearted program. It's a video-led program, and I'm about to run it tonight, okay? My first of 8 nights. I'm expecting over 50 guys.
Yep.
But you know what's going to happen is the majority of the men who really want to be there won't be there. Okay, the majority of the men who want to be there and need to be there won't be there. And then there'll be the guys who come who recognize very quickly wow, one, this is actually good and enjoyable. Two, I'm loving just being with other men. And three, I'm not alone, and this is normal. It's normal to have conversations and discuss some of the richness of the Bible, some of the challenges of the world, and some of my personal struggles in these topics. And so, what we saw there was a vision of masculinity, of some of the good, some of the brave, the natural identity that perhaps God has given men, but at the same time, some of that needs to be curved, that needs to be supported, and temperance needs to be brought by our brothers, and encouragement and all those things.
So when you say that some of the men who need to be there won't be there, is that because of I can't show weakness in this area, I've got to be the one who doesn't need this? Is that what it is?
Yeah, totally. Well, it's a lifetime of hiding the deepest parts and our struggles, right? Like it's a lifetime of maybe going to church and confessing our sins for a whole lifetime, and like literally, the majority of the men that turn up tonight will have never had a conversation about sexuality with other men. The majority, by far. And when I talk to men who go to churches, most have not heard it spoken from the pulpit, the platform in front of them. The messages have not gone deeply into these topics. They might get dropped occasionally.
Yeah.
And whether you're struggling with pornography, come and get healing. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
But we need more. Like, we need open conversation, and the recent US data shows that the majority, just over 50% of adult Christians who go to church, report some level of porn use, right? So for the first time in history. So, at some point we need to pull our heads out of the sand and go, what are we doing, churches? It's not enough to just open our doors and welcome people. We need to recognize that we need to embody a Christian community that supports people on what is a hidden but a devastating thing in our lives at the moment, which is the intersection with, the hypersexual world.
Join the conversation. Text 0447 488 316 with a question or comment for today's guest. Text 0447 488 316 to make your voice heard. 2020 on Vision Christian Radio.
Now, we've talked about the why. We're going to hear more about the what and the how, but we do have a phone call in, and that's from Adam in Marysville, Victoria. Good morning, Adam. What would you like to say to us?
Hey, are you there?
Yep, right here.
Oh, sorry. Hi, Wendy. My comments on, I believe that this is all coming from the verse in Ephesians 6:12, for we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against the rules and authority of this dark world and the evil spirits in the heavenly places. But I think it's manifesting in, I think this attack on the male masculine gender it's coming from the gender bending people and also feminism.
Okay.
And I was just wondering on what's the thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm going to flick straight to Paul Ninnes. He's the expert here.
Yeah, awesome.
Paul, what would you like to say to Adam?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Yeah, look, I totally agree. We're in a spiritual battle, and the internet and smartphones have opened the doors to a flood of, I don't like calling it evil, right? A lot of people are exposed to evil. They don't realise that they're just exposed to it, but evil then comes in and enters them when they're exposed in that way. And so I totally agree with that. And yeah, look, there are a lot of factors. I think one of the things that we do in the program is go back to Adam and Eve and the biblical stories and the biblical truths around masculinity and femininity and around what sex is created for in God's great plan for humanity. And all those things have been blurred through a lot of the cultural trends around gender, around parenting even, around education, and particularly what we see online. So, yeah, look, I totally agree. I think whilst we were saying earlier, not all traditional values have been great, the biblical traditional values that point people back to an identity in Jesus and that a man is made for a woman and a woman for a man are true and are very much the antidote to a lot of the rubbish and lies that have infiltrated the online dialogue and, community-wide dialogue.
Adam, thank you so much for calling in. We really appreciate it. God bless you. Paul, we've talked a little bit about the Stout-Hearted program as to why we need it. When I looked online to see how it was described, it said that it was a Jesus-centered men's program to meet a desperate need. So I'd like to, before we go to the news, we've still got about 10 minutes or so, what's involved in the program, and I guess also how people can be involved. What is the program? Just talk to us about that.
Yeah, totally. Look, there is a desperate need, but one of the things I'd say is it is for every man. I think one of the things we come up against, because there are centre point issues, and let's call pornography a centre point issue. Often people might put it in that box that's what it's about. It is about that, but it's about so much more. And so every man can grow in wholeness and every man can grow in holiness. And when you're in the thick of the environment that we've just been speaking about, you need to give yourself a fighting chance. And one of the things that I've pledged to in my own spiritual walk is to constantly fill myself with good messages about people and sexuality, truth, theology, because just to live in this world, I'm swimming in a sea of negative messages and mixed up messages. And so this is an opportunity for men to come together and strengthen their marriage, to strengthen their formation, to strengthen their habits, to strengthen their biblical understanding, to strengthen their practical habits in breaking habits and renewing new pathways in their life. So, the program is for every man. It is a discipleship program that is run in 3 different formats. The primary way is an 8-week program. You meet every week for one night with a group of men, a small group, 3 guys sitting on the couch, in your living room, or a hall full of, 50 to 100 people like I might have tonight at this church I'm going to. And you go on a journey. There are daily reflections that some men don't do, but they certainly add to the program that involve looking at yourself, looking at God's word, and then looking at things you can do practically. The program's video-led. I've found a lot of people who have done it say things like, it's like an alpha in the sense that it's a highly engaging video package. So you don't have to give any talks if you're the person leading it. You can just purchase it for your church, and usually it's not the church leader that does that. It's just a man who says, I've had enough. Right? I want to do something for myself and for the men in my community. And so it's video-led. We filmed it in over 40 locations with over 40 different guest presenters. So lots of experts from around Australia and a couple of internationals as well, speaking from theological, psychological. We have a Christian certified sex addiction therapist, all sorts of messages, a bunch of great women as well, sharing female perspectives, people who have dealt with the pointy end of the stick and things like how children are affected by pornography and things like that. But really, it's a call for every man to invite Jesus deeper into their life to become better and holier and to keep growing, and every man can keep growing. So most men, when they get there, it's like, wow, where has this been my whole life? Like some of the feedback we've been getting is just incredible.
So good. You mentioned women there. Can I just ask, is there something in the pipeline for women? Would you?
Yeah, it's a common question. We get a few questions. The first one is young men. The second one is women. And then the third one is spouses and wives. And all those, I would say yes in the pipeline. But we want to get this out and get this functioning well. But yeah, definitely there's a great need for women and we need more people, more labourers in that area as well. And I'd love to develop a women's program with some women in the future if anyone's listening.
Yeah. So Real Talk is by donation. I don't think you don't get any government funding. Or,
no government funding.
No.
Yeah.
So sometimes people are listening up to the news and then they have to go.
Yes.
Before we do that, can you just explain how people can support your work? Because I certainly can give a very high recommendation to support this work. We have 3 grandsons, and so I know how hard it is. When I would push them through a shopping centre in a stroller, when they were just little, we're talking 2 years old, I couldn't help but think to myself, they are actually being groomed to look at pornography even now. Yeah. And it might have just been a bras and things window, that sometimes is okay and sometimes just goes way too far.
Yeah, totally.
And so they are living in this. And it's not just pushing them through the shopping centre now. It's this online thing, this phone that I'm pointing at on my desk. It's just like it's a soup.
It's that on
in there.
steroids, right?
Yeah.
It's a super stimuli that's just intoxicating and hard to get away from. Yeah, look, I totally agree, and we're no doubt going to talk about some of our parenting things after the break.
Yeah.
If people want to support what we do, we are a not-for-profit charity, so we receive no government funding, but we do have a way people can give and can give in a tax-effective way. And the best way would be to reach out to us either to Stouthearted, which is stouthearted.com, or realtalkaustralia.com, and we can go from there. But our schools work is funded by what the schools pay for us to go into schools, but ministries like Stouthearted, literally, and I'll probably get emotional speaking about this, but Stouthearted exists because a couple of people gave decent amounts of money. We estimate that over 10,000 volunteer hours went into the making of Stouthearted. And so the bottom line is when you're under-resourced, it's really, really hard to get things off the ground. And that's my only hesitation in other spin-off programs is they just need time and they need money, really, because it's a lot of hard work to do production.
Yeah.
So we'd love support.
I'm allowed to say this because I'm not staff, and I'm this is my last day on the microphone, a bit little Neil cunts, but Peter and I are careful about what we support financially because we don't have an unlimited resource. But I can say that Real Talk and Vision are two of the organisations that we support on a monthly basis. So we don't have to remember to give because it's there as a monthly giving, and certainly Vision and Real Talk are two of the not a whole lot of organisations, but two of the organisations that we support monthly. So I would encourage people to consider doing that. I really, really would. It's so important for our young people. We do have to break for Vision National News now, but I don't know whether we've got just a minute for you to tell us if churches want to run Stouthearted, they still do the same way they can reach out that
totally.
way?
If they go to stouthearted.com, and some people aren't sure what the word stouthearted means but stout, S-T-O-U-T, hearted, all one word. It's a word in the Bible, and it has an old English sort of meaning, strong, sturdy, valiant, but it also can mean...
I'm old enough to know exactly what it means.
There was a song about it, back in the 50s, I think it was, that was big. But it also can mean slothful, right? So biblically, God sort of says to the Israelites, you've been stout-hearted, So it has that dual meaning, which I actually really like. So stouthearted.com. And I was saying before, it can be run as an 8-week program. It can also be run as a weekend. So we're about to have one in Brisbane run as a weekend. And then it can also be run as an individual. Now, that one still hasn't been released, hopefully released this month, but certainly this year. So individuals could do it very soon as well. But I find the group format is ideal, and the brotherhood and fraternity is a crucial part of the journey for men.
Before we went to the break, we were talking about the program For Men, By Men, Stouthearted, that is a new resource. And Paul was saying the stouthearted is actually an old-fashioned word, and I thought, well, actually, I know it really well, so that can't be that old-fashioned, surely. But as he said that, I was thinking, it used to be a word in an old hymn, and we have old hymns that was so hilarious when I was young. I remember one really well that went, and I never understood, but I still don't think I understand it, but it was, we tried the broken cisterns, Lord, but the waters failed. That's what we sang, and it always sounded like a toilet joke to me. But anyway, we had very, very funny hymns. Now, we talked about Stouthearted. I want to get on to your values-based education sort of stuff and your well-being lessons. You talk on human dignity, personal identity, relationships and sex, and you talk to children in schools, but not just schools, at churches, but also parents. And we're talking about from preschool, from kindy age, right through to year 12. What I want to go there and talk there. This is really, really important because our national curriculum, our Australian national curriculum, actually enforces this sort of teaching in every school, and that includes faith-based schools, because they want children to be taught about relationships. They want them to talk about respectful relationships. They want them to be talking about consent. Now, when we mention respectful relationships or consent or safe schools, that sort of stuff, in Christian Christian parents, we immediately feel our back going up because we know the sort of, I'll use the word woke messages that comes through a lot of this education through our education system and right up into university. But it is an opportunity whenever this sort of thing happens and the government says you've got to do this, then, it's just an opportunity for Christians to step up and step into that space. So you're in that space. Can you just talk to us a little bit about what you're doing in that space?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and look, I totally agree. The bottom line is the term respectful relationships and consent can trigger things in people, but it shouldn't. We want respectful relationships. Just because the term has been used for other things doesn't mean that it's not an incorrect term. So, look, what we do in that space, we've been around about 10 to 15 years, and we're the biggest relationships educator in the country, I believe, certainly from a live presenting point of view. So I think we're nearing 7,000 speaking sessions in 12 to 15 years. So we're all around the country, working in most cities around the country at some point throughout the year. And we predominantly in our live speaking speak to high schools and late primary. However, we have resources now from K or prep or kinder all the way through to year 12. And as you said, they're curriculum mapped. So schools have to be speaking about, and I put the word consent in inverted commas, have to be speaking about consent. There is a way to do this in a way that is respectful and Christian. In other words, consent doesn't necessarily mean sexual consent. It simply means getting permission or right access to something in the right way. And so it's actually a really dignified thing that highlights the dignity of others, recognises the autonomy that God gave human individuals to teach kids from an early stage that, I should ask in a way that respects the other person, shows love and care for them as a person with dignity and their own thoughts and decision making. There's a lot of side issues to this, right? Because obviously we know that parents have a role in Christian education, and I would totally affirm that, right? And that their kids can't make decisions on everything. The bottom line is that they don't have the capacity to make wise decisions. None of my kids would eat vegetables if the decision was up to them, right? Or get needles or whatever, Yeah. So the bottom line is it can go too far as well, this whole idea of consent and permission giving. But the bottom line is it's an opportunity to have schools bring in further biblical and identity affirming material rather than bring in secular material that inadvertently takes their children down a path that can actually have really bad outcomes. And so a classic example might be bodily autonomy, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the bottom line is you do have an element of autonomy that God has given us. But if you take that too far, you can see why someone later in life might go, it's my body, my choice, therefore I can commit an abortion, right? And so autonomy is rightly placed under the fact that God gave us our lives and that we are actually his first, right? And that everything we have is owed to God and a gift from God. And so you can see how that topic is an opportunity to affirm both those things simultaneously rather than accidentally go on a pathway that leads people away from the truth that their life is a gift given to them to be received and then also given.
And your material, the resources that you've developed over many years now, this is a question, they're acceptable to Australian Education Department and the E-Safety Commissioner?
Totally, yeah. So we're a registered e-safety provider. So when it comes to those digital world topics, we're registered with the E-Safety Commissioner, and we are mapped to a CARA from K, through to 10, the HP curriculum there. And so, I would encourage people to check them out.
Yeah. Parents listening will be really keen to know more, and so I want to go into more of what you might have for parents. I can remember when Peter and I took our first child home from the hospital. Back in those days, you stayed in the hospital, like 5 days. Now they're in and out, like whoosh. But 5 days in the hospital, and then we finally get to be on our own with our baby. So in the hospital, the baby would be taken into the nursery even at night and let the mother sleep. Mothers listening now will be thinking, oh boy, I wish I'd been born in that era. But finally you walk out of that hospital and you're holding that baby in your arms, and it's all of a sudden just you two, and we were young. I think Peter was probably 23 and I was probably 20, but I don't try to remember, but we were young with our first baby.
Yes.
And And we walk out, and I can remember Peter jokingly saying, there is an instruction manual down the nappy, isn't there? Like somewhere in the nappy, I'm going to find this instruction manual. Because we get home, and it's just like all of a sudden this little person is our responsibility. And it's the most amazing blessing, but also overwhelming.
Yes.
And I think particularly today when, kids are faced with so much more. Our son, who's now in his 40s too, he's our middle child, he was in grade 12 before we got our first computer. My kids went through most of their schooling with no online world at all.
Yep.
And even when you got your first computer, that wasn't online.
Yes.
You had to actually, use the whole dial-up. So the parents today are facing a very different world. What can you say to them, and what can you offer them as far as resources?
Yeah, look, thank you, and thanks for the introduction. You're making me reminisce bringing my babies home, and it's the weightiest 6 pounds you will ever hold, right? And that weight continues, and we need to, like Malachi 4, turn the hearts of parents back to children on these topics. We have a weightiness, and it's never been harder in certain areas. It's also easier. We can tap into knowledge to help us easier. But at the same time, it was a simpler life then that, kids on school holidays, for instance, go down the park and play and learn how to make their slingshots and play tiggy or tag, depending on what part of the country you're from.
Catch tadpoles in the creek.
Yeah, exactly, right. And we've just had a wholesome family week up at Harvey Bay, and it was beautiful, right? Catching soldier crabs and just the simplicity. So, but it's hard, right? Because then we've got our kids screaming on the drive home and asking for devices and all those sorts of things. So there's so many topics we could talk about here. Wendy, you might want to direct me, but the first thought that comes to mind is to, again, you turn your heart to your children, and that then helps you go, well, what can I do to love them and to serve them?
Yeah.
And really the key thing is to not put your head in the sand and pretend that there's not these challenges that have come with the modern world, is to actually embrace that I'm the parent and I'm or the guardian, that for whatever reason God has placed me in this role, and I have a responsibility that I'm actually quite well equipped for, because I can Google things, but I need to step into that space. I can't just let my child have free time on their device without considering what's going on. I can't just let them be exposed to pornography at age 10 or 11 like most kids. I need to actually reduce the risks while at the same time building them up, a bit like the wall of Nehemiah, right? In Nehemiah, the building up as well as fighting back, right? And as parents, I think that's a really great analogy. We need to build up and push back, defend whilst constructing. So there are two ways you can approach these topics with your children.
And I think for me, it's just that keeping that conversation going all of the time. And, sometimes the kids get in the car after school and they're exhausted in the same way as any of us who have a job. We get home. For many of us, the last thing you feel like doing straight away is talking.
Yes.
So then sometimes needs to be that time of silence, but you also really want to be in tune with your kids and know, you can sort of tell if something's not quite right.
Yes.
I can remember for some of our grandchildren, there's been times when they've come home from school and my kids would ring and say, just really pray for this particular one because there's something going on at school.
Yes.
And what's happened in the end, you found out in the end that there's been a phone or a device shoved in their faces from other kids at school with images that they then find very hard to get out of their mind. How do we deal with that for our children when they've, you in your youth, I've heard your story, you were confronted with images that you wish you hadn't seen. So what's the story for them then? Because I don't think it's now if they see something bad, it's actually when it's going to happen.
Yep.
So how do we deal with that?
Yeah, so I think it's accepting as parents that idea that they're going to see things that are really difficult to handle, and so how do we preempt that and how do we support that? So that doesn't mean taking away their innocence too early, but there are beautiful ways you can have deliberate conversations. I know you've got a great book, Think, Turn, Tell, I think it's called, that is a great resource, and so things like that. So again, it's recognising being proactive as a parent and having those conversations. And again, we've developed resources to try to help parents with these sorts of topics. And I think it's, there's a quote from Chess, and I usually muddle it up, but it goes something like, if it's worth doing poorly. Right? If it's worth doing poorly. In other words, you're better off having a go at doing something that's really important and doing it not to the perfect standard than not having a go. And that's what I would say to every parent, right? Get in there and have a go.
Yeah.
Have a conversation. Try to meet the child where they're at, age-appropriate conversations. So, for instance, with pornography, it's not using the word pornography with a 5-year-old, but it is saying you will see stuff online that can be bad and yucky and make you feel icky. And it might be people showing their private parts or the parts that are normally covered by the swimsuit, right? And so having that conversation so that when it happens, and the research shows that kids are more resilient if they've had conversations before. So not only are they less likely to see stuff, but they're less likely to be affected by it when they do see it, right? So super important conversations, and not just narrowing this. We keep talking to the center point issue of pornography, but just social media and phone use. And as you said, like ads during the rugby league grand final last night and cheerleaders on the side, like there's so many opportunities for inappropriate images and thoughts and messages to come in, but there's also opportunities for conversations with parents,
Yeah. You can have a conversation with Paul if you want to ring in. You can ring in on 1-800-316-316, or you can text in any questions or comments on 0447 488 316. You might have a way that you have actually handled this issue that you can share with other people as well, with your children. I think the other thing, Paul, when you talk about having these conversations and just do it, like, if it's worth doing, do it poorly. I actually really like that. As soon as you said it, I thought, no, that's not what it is. Oh, yeah,
exactly. It sounds weird, doesn't it? We've been taught by our parents, if you're going to do it well.
Yeah, that's right.
But it freezes people sometimes. Yes. I don't know what to say. No. So I go into freeze and over-analysis.
Yes.
Like,
But if you take that way of doing it, do it. I think your child is also more likely not to feel as if they've done something wrong if it happens to them, because I know for my grandchildren, when they were shown this image and they knew that it wasn't good and it was bad, they felt somehow complicit in having seen it.
Yep.
Whereas again, it was unavoidable for them.
And I think that's how the enemy wins this battle, right? Is he gets us with the thing, and then he gets us with the hiding and the shame, and this goes right back to the Garden of Eden. So that's normal, whether it be an adult or a child, is to see something that makes them feel a bit yucky and to go internal with it. And so we need to try to pull people out of that place. So whether it's something where they had no blame for it, right? So someone shoving something in their face or something popping up on a screen. Or it's something where they have made poor choices. Both present an opportunity for parents and guardians to try to pull them out of the place of shame. And that doesn't mean that you accept whatever they've chosen to do or you accept the thing they've seen, but it gives you an opportunity to just affirm them again that they are good, that they're not what they have done. That hasn't become who they are, right? They are good who they are. And so, really making a concerted effort to lower the shame, even to normalise it and go, oh, that's actually a lot of kids see stuff, or a lot of people, can feel the pull of that thing and go to something that's not good for them. Like going to lollies, right? We all want to have a better diet, but most of us eat at a lower standard than what we actually would like to eat, and that goes with our moral life as well. And so teaching them that this is the struggle, this is the world you're in, and this is the battle. You won't use that word with a kid, but this is the battle that human beings are invited into, a love story that's in the middle of a battle, right?
So my go-to is not necessarily lollies, but it's more savoury, and I trick myself into thinking that pea chips are better than potato chips, and I have no idea why. But, when we're talking about kids feeling as if they've made bad choices, that's really easy as well. And what I mean is we are drawn to see things that we know are not good. And okay, so I'm going to give an example of Charlie Kirk's murder. How many people, even though they didn't want to see it, went looking for the moment that he was shot, because somehow we are drawn to that, something that we know is not going to be good for us. So that is that's the natural flesh, isn't it? That's the flesh that we're warring against. But kids, when they see something that is not good and particularly if we're talking about pornography or something like that, there's almost a natural desire to see more, and it's not going to be good for them.
Yep. Correct. Sin is like potatoes. It grows in the dark, right? So again, there's an opportunity for individuals listening and for parents to try to pull things out into the light, right? The conversation in the light, like, sexual stuff, God doesn't blush, right? He made us this way. It's beautiful. It's beautiful and it's rich. And when we keep it hidden, it can maybe give an overtone that all things are dark and all things should be kept hidden. And that's not true. But particularly in these sinful areas or these areas that appeal to our fallen nature, again, we can actually shine a light on them, and the dark is like the candle in the dark scripture, right? Like it just removes the power of the darkness immediately. And I find that not just in the children's space, but in the adult space and the masculinity space. So many men, half the battle might be for them to admit, hey, I've got a struggle in this area. I look at pornography or whatever it is. And so for children, if we can get them to take off the weight of whatever they've been carrying and what they've seen or what they've done, that's a beautiful opportunity.
We've got a really good text here, and I know it's something that you actually really like speaking on as well. It's Andrew, and he's from Kinnerton in Victoria, and the text says, thank you for this vital topic. How do you handle consent, which inherently suggests sex outside marriage? I know that marriage, you speak a lot about healthy marriages as well. So if you're talking about consent, Andrew says it's inherently suggesting sex outside marriage.
It's a great question, and it's the normal concern that comes up from Christians, and I probably would have had it myself until we wrestled with the strategies of how to do this. The bottom line is you never separate the conversation of consent from God's plan for love, sex and marriage. So whenever Christian schools and Christian parents speak about these important topics, because again, I think it's okay to teach kids that you can say no and what to do in situations and to identify your own feelings and desires. That's okay. But you don't isolate that as something that then can be construed as sex outside of marriage. You continue to draw people back to, but hey, there's a bigger and better vision here. But see, consent is also important in marriages, right? The bottom line is, my wife, if she was here, would talk about how safe she feels in the sexual space. That's how God intends it to be. Now, if you're doing something against someone's will, whether it be in marriage or in childhood or in a premarital sexual relationship, you're going against the dignity God has given someone, right? And so, the key answer, the short answer to how we can have a Christian consent conversation is to never just do it in isolation, to always bring it into God's greater plan. And there's simple ways to do that. We talk about looking to the maker's instructions, right? So if we're going to talk about this consent stuff, recognize that, hey, there could be even a better way than having to talk about this. And, if I want to find out, I'm typical male, right? I'm wearing this sports watch and I couldn't use it for like 2 years. And eventually I gave in and Googled the maker's instructions on how to use it, right? And then I can use it fine. Yeah. So, the Bible gives us a great vision for how marriage and sex is meant to be. Yeah.
Peter and I were up at the Gold Coast this weekend. We were both speaking at a camp up there. And the topic of the conversation, the topic of the 3 sessions that we had was the Imago Dei. And I know, again, that's something that's dear to you, the whole sense of our human dignity. So Real Talk goes into human dignity. Can you just talk to us a little bit about human dignity and the whole concept of being made in the image of God and what that actually means in this space?
Yeah, well, look, the beauty of being made in God's image is that it's the image and likeness of God. So as we come to understand the beauty and dignity of human beings, including our sexuality, we come to understand the beauty and awesomeness of God, such as the loving unity of the Trinity and how God is a life-giving entity, right? So for me and in our materials, we don't just try to go, hey, sort of here's the teaching, but actually we try to go, here's the teaching. Let this inspire your heart and your vision for human dignity and for how it's meant to be. And as a result, it can evangelize people and lead them into a greater understanding and union with Jesus. I'm not sure how much you'd like me more to...
Look, we could talk on this for ages, but you were going to say something.
Look, I do have another thought that just popped in, so I'll go with it, is that really, in some ways, it's the antidote to objectification, right? So the world wants us to take and use and minimize, but dignity of people really allows us to see the beauty of wanting to do what's best for someone. And so when we talk about a topic like the sending of nudes of an individual, right, it's a very clear objectification. It's a minimalisation of a person's dignity. And so the beauty of highlighting that we're made in the image and likeness of God is that it expands our heart for the beauty and the love and the awesomeness of humankind, which takes us away from our ability to use them and to treat them as a commodity.
So we've got to wrap it up. Honestly, we could talk on, but just give us another idea of where people go for resources and how they can support Real Talk.
Yeah, so we're on social media, Real Talk Oz, and our main presenting website is Real Talk Australia. But the one we've referred to today is actually called Real Talk Education, where people can get our resources. So anyone connected with Christian schools or even parents, reach out to us. If someone's like a homeschool parent, we do a super discount because it's set up for schools and we don't want you to have to pay that. So that's realtalkeducation.org. And then we also have a parents website. We've got some online videos that are free, and then there's a paid subscription people can pay for a bunch of different videos. But yeah, if you want to, for instance, watch a video about how do you talk to your kids about some of these topics, there's little YouTube clips you can find there. So that's realtalkparents.com.
So good. I really do recommend this work to you. John, why did I say John? That's hilarious. Paul.
All right.
I'm going to call you Paul John from now on. Yeah. Paul, thanks for joining us. That's why I said John, because I was going to say joining us. Yeah, I've got it now. Look, God blessings to you and Emma as you serve God and the Australian Church together, but particularly our men and boys. They're pretty heavy on our heart at the moment, and particularly our most precious possessions, all of our children. So you're one of God's amazing warriors, and we thank God for you. So thank you for coming in.
Awesome, Wendy. Great to be here.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.